On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the East Shore, I'd like to welcome you to this event. The League is a nonpartisan grassroots political organization, and we neither support nor oppose candidates or political parties. We do encourage citizens to be involved in their government, and we host candidate debates and forums to better inform the public on candidates and issues before they go to vote. This debate is between your candidates for First Selectman of Brantford. They are Jamie Cosgrove, Republican, and Tom Brockett, Democrat. I am Elise Lowe from Guilford, a member of our local league's Voter Service Committee, and I will serve as moderator for this debate. Our format will offer equal time for each candidate to respond to questions that were developed with input from Brantford residents. Our timekeepers are present to help keep us all on track. The order of speaking was determined by a coin toss and will rotate throughout the hour. We will begin with 1-minute opening statements of qualifications for the office of First Selectman. And Mr. Cosgrove will speak first.
Well, thank you, and I thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate tonight. And I think this is a platform where we can discuss the issues concerning Brantford and speak to the accomplishments of my administration for the past 8 years, and where we feel Brantford can go in the future. We've had a lot of tremendous success, I feel, over the 8 years. Working at my team, but also working with the community together. We've accomplished quite a bit. And, you know, I said back on election night in 2013, it wasn't about Republican, Democrats, and unaffiliated, and that's how we've governed. I will just say, for the interest in time tonight, when speaking, I may refer to the Democrats. I just want to be clear. I'm speaking of the current leadership within the Democratic Town Committee and my opponent and his team. I've worked quite well with many Democrats to accomplish quite a bit, so I just think that's worth noting. Look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Brockett, your opening statement.
Thank you. I, too, thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this debate tonight. I am one of 6 boys born and raised in Brantford. Our parents stressed education, kindness, and hard work. I'm a graduate of Wesleyan University and UConn School of Law. I practiced labor law for many years and have advocated for working families for my entire life. I am a Vietnam veteran. I am also past president of Brantford Little League. I currently serve on the RTM representing the 7th District and am the Democratic Minority Leader. There are 3 reasons why I am running for First Selectman. Taxes have risen 12% in the last 8 years. I will protect our taxpayers by keeping taxes low while providing good quality services to our residents. Second, I will make economic development a top priority and hire a full-time economic development coordinator on day 1. That position has been vacant for the past 2 years, costing the town much revenue. Economic development will include revitalization of our downtown area, as well as aggressive pursuing smart business for Brantford.
Thank you. Move on to our questions now. And Mr. Brockett, I'll ask you first, please. Could you share what your short and long-term visions are for Brantford? And you have a 2-minute response time.
Yes, thank you. The short-term vision for Brantford is to keep our taxes down and protect our taxpayer dollars. Over the course of the last 8 years, taxes have risen 12%, our budget has increased by 18%, and our town debt has increased by nearly 30%, 28% to be exact. While at the same time, our revenue has shortfall, with our grand list only increasing 0.5% per year on average over that 8-year period. We can do better. Just in the last year, we took $3 million out of the rainy day fund to supplement the budget so there would be a minimal tax increase for our residents. We can do better. We need to bring in economic development to generate more revenue, and we need to bring in younger families into Brantford. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cosgrove.
Okay, I believe your question was the short-term and long-term. I've always taken a long-term vision. It's something that I think has positioned Brantford quite well these last 8 years and will continue moving forward. We'll speak to the facts. The town of Brantford, the $3 million that Mr. Brockett referenced, that was taken out of our fund balance to ensure if we had a lower than expected collection rate due to the uncertainty of the pandemic. So that was a strategic move approved by our Board of Finance as well as the RTM, I might add. And quite honestly, a budget shortfall, I'm not sure with these budget shortfalls, we were in a fortunate position that we could take money out of our fund balance because we didn't have a budget shortfall. As far as the budgets, we have when my past 8 years, have actually restrained budget growth compared to the 10 years prior to my administration taking place. As far as the debt service in the town of Brantford is still 8 cents on every dollar. Keep where we were when we started. But keep in mind, that 8 cents on every dollar is paying for a middle school, is paying for a library, is paying for a senior center. We did $100 million worth of projects. That's what is in my debt service. Previous administration, keep in mind, they were putting, what was in their debt service? Legal fees. So I'm quite proud of our record, quite proud of where we are. I think we're in a strong position moving forward. As far as a full-time economic development director, we do have an economic development director. Mr. Brockett stated he needs to hire one on day one. Let me tell you, I've met with a lot of businesses, and when they want to come into Brantford, they don't want to speak to a full-time employee, an entrenched full-time employee that feels that they can pick winners and losers. They want to, the voters of Brantford are not voting and electing a full-time economic development director. They're voting for first selectman. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Brockett, would you like to add anything?
Yes. As to the Economic Development Coordinator, that position has been vacant for 2 years, and undoubtedly that empty position has cost the taxpayers in Brantford as well as the town of Brantford much needed revenue. It was only in the last 30 days that a part-time Economic Development Coordinator was put on. All of our surrounding towns have an Economic Development Coordinator. We previously had an Economic Development Coordinator, and we need an Economic Development Coordinator to bring businesses into Brantford and to revitalize downtown Brantford. Thank you.
Mr. Cosgrove, any more?
Yeah, like I said, as far as the town of Brantford and its fiscal condition, a lot of it has to do with our strong tax base, which has grown under this administration. Look around, there's projects throughout town, many projects within the pipeline, so there will be continued growth. As I said, the people of Brantford are electing a first selectman. When businesses come to town, they want to meet with the first selectman to gauge the pulse of the community, to see if there's support there for the business. That's the role of the first selectman, not a higher position.
Mr. Brockett, anything more?
Yes, thank you very much. I would disagree vehemently with the first selectman. The role of the first selectman is to be the leader in town and to hire personnel that are going to do the job for the taxpayers in this town. A full-time economic development coordinator is needed to bring businesses into town. It shouldn't be businesses looking to come here. It should be an economic development coordinator going out and bringing businesses into town. This is a highly competitive area, and we need to be proactive in economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything more, Mr. Cosgrove?
I'm sure we'll get to it, but just quickly, as far as development, there are businesses, you may recall, we announced recently that Amazon is looking to come in town. There's been many developments. If my opponent feels he needs a full-time position to do that, that's his prerogative. As far as how we have structured our government, it is effective in accomplishing that goal.
All
and
right.
I will, go ahead.
With or without an economic development coordinator, what would your plans be for improving the development in town? Mr. Cosgrove first.
So from day one, I've always taken the position that developers, businesses want a fair shot, a fair process. And that's what we do. We ensure we have boards and commissions that have members on there who will apply the regulations that have been approved by the town to ensure that there's a fair process. As far as their interactions with Town Hall, we have made improvements within the land use departments. I use land use departments in a broad sense. Obviously, that includes wetlands, planning and zoning, building, engineering. We've made improvements in terms of our permitting process. We've been working on it to go online, to make the process easier, more transparent for people coming into town. And again, we continue to promote the town of Brantford as high quality of life, as well as the lowest taxes in the area with the most services. That's what businesses and developers want.
Thank you. Mr. Brockett?
Yes, thank you for the question. With respect to economic development, there are two major areas that this town is lacking. First of all, it is the revitalization of the downtown area, and we need to make smart decisions to bring businesses here. In fact, we have the playbook. We have the Plan on Conservation and Development, and we have the Transit Orient District TD plan. The current administration has done nothing with respect to either of these plans. The Economic Development Coordinator position has been vacant for 2 years. We've squandered 4 years with the TOD sitting on the shelf and 2.5 years with POCD being ignored. The problem is not plan implementation. The problem is a lack of leadership. This has not only cost our community hundreds of thousands of dollars, but good paying jobs. This is not acceptable. We need to do better.
Mr. Cosgrove, any more?
Certainly. Actually, there's a lot there, but I just say, I agree. We need to revitalize the downtown, and that's why I've secured $2.5 million just to do that. And I asked the people who are maybe watching this tonight to go on our town website, learn more about the study that we're doing and the public outreach that we have going on, the survey, as well as we'll be hosting some meetings. So I agree, it should be revitalized. That's why I secured $2.5 million towards that effort.
Mr. Brockett?
Yes, thank you. I was on the RTM when that $2.5 million was secured, and I voted in favor of that $2.5 million. But that $2.5 million doesn't revitalize downtown and bring businesses here. That $2.5 million brings a facelift to the center of Brantford, something that hasn't been done in 30 years, which will include sidewalks, paving, fixing some drainage, and some crosswalks. With respect to long-term, we still need to revitalize the center of town with respect to economic concerns, development, and businesses. Thank you.
Anything more?
Yeah, just to be clear, the $2.5 million was not local tax dollars. So Mr. Brockett did not approve $2.5 million through the RTM. I secured that from the Lot SIP program, which is essentially federal funds that are administered through the state of Connecticut. So Mr. Brockett did not approve $2.5 million. The other thing, real quickly, going back to the POCD and the TOD, which was done under my administration, the POCD, I will add, nothing's been done. Are you kidding me? We have a coastal resiliency fund, the first in the state. Not only, I'll get back to that after.
All right.
I'll respect the time.
Mr. Brockett?
Nothing further.
Okay. Next question to Mr. Brockett first. Given the prospect of steadily decreasing state aid, do you foresee a need to increase the mill rate over the next few years?
No, I do not see a need to increase the mill rate. And to the contrary, the Democrats in 2020 and 2021 directed correspondence to the Board of Finance in our town and the First Selectman asking for a pause given the COVID-19 pandemic, given the large amount of money we have in our rainy day fund. So going forward, I do not see any need to increase the mill rate with respect to our taxes, even though the current administration has increased the mill rate some 12% in the past 8 years.
Mr. Cosgrove?
Keeps going back to the 12% in the past 8 years, and that's, just do a quick average. You're talking about 1.5% per year. The Brantford's budget strategy has been recognized by Standards & Poor's as a strong management of fiscal responsible way of budgeting. I will say this, Mr. Brockett did send 2 letters, yet to the Board of Finance not to raise the mill rate and to not improve additional funding. But yet, when given the opportunity, both through meetings, which I would call with the majority and minority leader, which includes Mr. Brockett did not, and on the floor of the full RTM, did not offer one substantial a recommendation how to have a budget with no mill increase, with no budget increase. Yes, you referenced the healthy fund balance, which we were able to utilize. We have utilized that, and we do utilize it, and primarily because of our strong economic position.
Thank you. Mr. Brockett, more?
Yeah, the first selectman has raised two issues. First is the AAA bond rating. I agree with the first selectman that we need to maintain our AAA bond rating. We have had a finance director in this town for many years through many administrations, Mr. Finch, who's done a marvelous job with our finances and to get us to a AAA bond rating. However, having said that, the standard in Connecticut is about 15% of your annual budget, which puts us at about $18,000. Right now, our rainy day fund is $29 million.
Thank you. Mr. Cosgrove?
So again, I'm not sure where we're going. First, the critical, we have too much, then we're not using it. Your question was, I think, regards to state, the need to raise in case of state reduction in funds. All right, in 2017, we're looking at that very scenario, the zeroing out of state aid. We planned for that, where many communities around the state could not adopt a budget. Brantford was fortunate that we were strong, so healthy financially that we were able to utilize that fund balance. So we became observers of the state budget rather than those with uncertainty.
All right. Anything more?
No.
All right. Next question. Mr. Cosgrove first. Madison and Guilford have just announced that they will share an economic development director themselves. Would you suggest similar regional cooperation for any of Brantford's administrative positions?
Not in the role for economic development. And I thought my opponent said it was full-time in the neighborhood. Well, now they're sharing it. So I think Brantford, for that position, is unique in itself. I will tell you, I did participate in many discussions with our area towns and looking at some initiatives that we can take on collaboratively. Where we have and realized efficiencies through those. So I'm not opposed to it, but for that specific position that you mentioned in that area, I would not look, although I think we can have a coordinated effort in marketing the area, but in terms of that position, I think it should stay solely here in Brantford.
Mr. Brockett?
Yeah, thank you. Brantford is a community of some 28,000 people. We were fortunate enough up until September of 2019 to have a full-time economic development coordinator dedicated to Brantford. Again, on day one of my administration, we will have a full-time economic development coordinator that is dedicated to Brantford to help our businesses and to bring businesses into Brantford. Thank you.
You know, just to maybe close this circle on the full-time economic development coordinator. The town of Brantford, as I said, businesses don't want to have an entrenched full-time position that basically at their whim picks and chooses who comes to town or who the town will support. That's not who they want to come. The town of Brantford did have, previous administrations did have that model, and it didn't work.
Mr. Brockett?
No, I disagree with that. Brantford needs a full-time economic development coordinator to bring businesses into town to generate revenue in a variety of different industries, especially with respect to the revitalization of downtown Brantford. We have had several major stores depart our center in the last 3 years under the current administration. Thank you.
All right. And moving right along. The next question, Mr. Brockett first. With many of the town's roads and higher tax properties being near the shore, what more should be done to prepare for the challenge of sea level rise?
Thank you. We are very fortunate in our town to have established one of the first coastal resiliency funds, as the first selectman has mentioned, in January of 2019. We seeded that with $1 billion that was recommended by the Board of Finance and passed by the RTM. That fund has now increased to $1.9 million, and it is being invested. We can use that fund to avoid some issues with respect to sea level rise, such as making some of our roads higher in the flooded areas. We can also use that fund for a variety of different other sources. In addition to using the Coastal Resiliency Fund, we are fortunate to have received $8.5 million under the American Rescue Plan, which we can use to help fix our sewer system and the flooding that creates as well. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Cosgrove?
Okay, great, thank you. And actually, this question relates back to the previous question regarding the Plan of Conservation and Development, which I didn't get to fully answer. So correct, Brantford was, as I said, not only the first in the state, but arguably probably the first in the country to establish a coastal resiliency fund. That is, so what that means is we're taking an approach as sea level rise, climate change is a long-term liability affecting our town. As stated in the Plan of Conservation and Development, actually this fund was a direct response to a statement in the POCD. I recall vividly the conversation myself and Jim Finch had. He had come into my office after I had just toured a neighborhood which I was concerned about that was seeing increased flooding. He said, how about this idea of this fund? Do you think we can get the support of the people of Brantford? I said, Jim, the people of Brantford have established a cultural guardrail to address long-term liabilities. That's how we need to present this. And the Board of Finance approved $1 million that was requested by this administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brockett, more?
I agree that's an important fund and we need to continue to fund it.
All right. Anything more?
I would just like to say, with that, again, that established was also the establishment of that also followed up with myself, the finance director, going up to Hartford, working with the legislature, proposing a bill that Senator Cohen put forward. We proposed that bill, received unanimous support by the state Senate, nearly unanimous through the state legislature, to allow us to invest those funds appropriately. That's what this administration has accomplished.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Yes. What the administration doesn't tell you, though, is in January of 2019, when the fund was created, a statute by the state of Connecticut authorized investing that money effective July 1st, 2019. And the administration waited 2+ years before they invested that money in anything other than regular market.
Anything more?
So the statute that Mr. Brockett is referring to is the statute that the town of Brantford proposed, this administration put forward. We championed that up in Hartford. Not only did we champion it, we're the ones who brought that to Hartford. Yes, they passed it, allowed us to invest it. If you go through the timeline, I only realize I only have a couple seconds. We've spent the last couple of years trying to get the state of Connecticut to set up through the Treasurer's office the ability to have other towns, including Brantford, have them manage the funds. So that's what waited. That's what took long. The state didn't adopt that, and so we ended up investing on our own.
Anything more?
No, notwithstanding that, we could have had it invested in July 1st of 2019 rather than wait until August or September of 2021. Thank you.
Response?
I guess just sometimes being the first isn't quick enough, I guess.
All right. Mr. Cosgrove, next question. The expansion of dining and entertaining facilities and the increased popularity of walking and biking have created congested roads along the shoreline, especially during the summer. What more should be done to ensure everyone's safety?
Okay, so yes, that is something that is a concern of ours. And we have actually received funding, which this administration sought through to have a corridor study done of Route 146. It's primarily an area which is designated a bike route, as well as a scenic road, which a lot of people enjoy, to address these such issues. I've recently had a meeting with representatives from DOT, Deputy Commissioner of DOT, and had the discussion of actually doing a road safety audit, in particular in the area of Monowese, along Indian Neck Avenue from Monowese down to Sybil Avenue to the water, to have that very issue addressed. I would just real quickly, going back to, you mentioned about the expansion of restaurants. This connects with the center of town. One of the things that I had proposed and was supportive of and brought forward was with the planning and zoning to look at the parking requirements to support restaurants, to make sure it wasn't a burden for that, because that's something we want to see continue to grow.
Okay, Mr. Brockett?
Yes, thank you. One of the things we can do to improve safety of our residents is to form a sidewalk committee. Under the Plan on Conservation and Development, it recognized that the center of town was a key focal point in our community. Some 18 months ago, in a bipartisan fashion with a Republican colleague of mine, we directed correspondence to the First Selectman's office and the Board of Selectmen requesting a sidewalk committee be formed to look at our crumbling sidewalks and to be able to connect more neighborhoods to the center of town so we could bring the center of town up and be safer for our residents and, where feasible, to put bike lanes in. When the First Selectman and the Board of Selectmen received that request to form a sidewalk committee, it was immediately dismissed as not being necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cosgrove?
I don't recall it being dismissed as not being necessary. I believe our Planning and Zoning Commission has actually taken up this issue. Granted, maybe they haven't, and through the Planning and Zoning Department. I recognize they probably have not progressed as quickly as we'd like to see. But perhaps that's due to the amount of applications because of the economic development that's occurring in Branford.
Mr. Brockett?
Well, I would just point out that it's a part of the POCD, it's part of the TOD. We requested a sidewalk committee. We've not had a sidewalk committee. Our sidewalks are crumbling. There's neighborhoods that we need to connect into the center of town. And as First Selectman, I would make that a top priority.
Anything more?
I actually, just real quick, I mean, under my administration, we've actually have repaired and increased the amount of sidewalk that is repaired, replaced, and installed under my administration.
Thank you. Mr. Brockett, anything more?
No, thank you.
Okay. Next question to you, sir. Waste removal has become a major problem in the state. How should Branford best deal with it?
Well, Branford has two forms of waste removal right now. For solid waste, it goes to our trash to energy plant in Connecticut, and then we have multi-stream recyclables. Very recently, the Solid Waste Commission interviewed a variety of different consultants, and the Board of Finance has made a recommendation to the full RTM to hire a particular consultant to look into our recyclables and our solid waste, to come up with a 10-year plan to see what we should do with the solid waste. That study should be back within 16 to 18 weeks. I will vote in favor of the recommendation because I think solid waste and recyclables are a major issue going forward, and we need to pay close attention to it.
Mr. Cosgrove?
I'm glad to hear that Mr. Brockett intends to support the study. This is something that I've brought forward. I know you mentioned that the Board of Finance, but this came through my office. And I will just also say, I sit on the board, the executive committee of the Bristol Resource Recovery Group. That's the group, the policy board, or it used to be a policy board. Now it's it is a policy board, excuse me, it used to be an operating committee that oversees our waste to energy plant. We had identified several years ago that the state of Connecticut does have a crisis, a looming crisis, in regards of not only solid waste, but also recycling. I have met with probably every state representative, state senator that represents Branford and beyond, speaking to them about this issue, that this was going to come to fruition. I had actually requested maybe 3 or 4 years ago money to do a study, which unfortunately on the RTM did not get through, but I'm glad to see that there is support to carry it through this time.
Mr. Brockett, more?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, I would note that part of the problem with our recyclables has been contamination in the last 18 to 24 months, depending on how the material gets down to Bridgeport. And part of that problem is directly the responsibility of the transfer station. And because we haven't had a full-time director at the transfer station for a period of more than 2 years, the employees have a difficult time watching the contractors come in and dump their stuff. So that's another part of the equation. Thank you.
Mr. Cosgrove?
Just to be clear, the contamination issue started well before the vacancy of that position. We have since restructured, but to be clear, it was in the result of that restructuring. It was something that we're have identified and working to address in terms of the contamination. And that is something that this study is looking at, the full process from how it is put out the curb, collected, and transported to the proper facilities.
Mr. Brockett, more?
Nothing further.
Okay. Mr. Cosgrove, the next question. Should the qualifications or the process for making appointments to town boards and commissions be changed? And if so, how?
No, actually, when I took office in 2013, prior to me taking office, the appointments came through the town committees, Republican Town Committee, the Democrat Town Committee. They would make a recommendation to the full Board of Selectmen. Since I took office, we still allow people to go through the town committees, but what we did was also let people know if they want to be involved in their local government, serve on a board of commission, regardless of party of affiliation, that they can come forward directly to through the selectman's office and put their name forward for consideration. So I think that is a process that has opened up our boards and commissions to many people that don't want to be involved politically in the political party, but they want to be part of improving our town and building a great community.
Mr. Brockett?
Yes, thank you for the question. I agree with the first selectman. I would not change the process with respect to how people are appointed to boards and commissions. We have over 4 boards and commissions. These are wonderful volunteers from all walks of our community. The only thing I would make certain of if I were elected first selectman is that when somebody gets appointed to a board or a commission, that they are absolutely qualified to hold that position. And that is not the case as we sit here tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Cosgrove?
Well, I'm not sure who Mr. Brockett's being critical of or saying isn't qualified to hold a position. The boards and commissions, and as he stated, we have several here in Brantford, over 40. And if somebody wants to serve, I think being a member of the town, being in the community, I think having a diversity among the board with people bringing different perspectives, different backgrounds, different experiences. I think that is what's important to have a well-run board.
Mr. Brockett?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Brockett, next question first. What can be done to improve communications between the town and our residents?
Thank you. Under this administration, communications is essentially non-existent. During the entire COVID-19 pandemic, we received little or none automated telephone calls from our first selectmen, while our neighboring towns kept their people informed on a weekly basis. Just by way of example, at 5:30 every Friday night, the first selectman in Guilford put out an automated phone call informing his constituents of updates. We did not receive that in Brantford. Recently, they've been changing gas lines and water lines in the center of town for a period of 4 to 5 months. We have various road closures on every day and the roads are blocked. None of our residents have received any communications from the first selectman's office with respect to that. Communications are vital to the success of our community. We need to have better communications to our residents. Under my administration, whatever I know, our residents will know. Thank you.
Mr. Cosgrove?
I would strongly disagree. I think my administration has communicated with the residents. Perhaps it's not through robocalls, and that is by choice. It is we reserve our robocalls, our direct calls, for emergency situations. It's been proven that an inundation of calls actually then people will less apt to listen to them when they do come in an emergency situation. So the lack of using robocalls is by design. It's best practice, I feel, and will continue. However, as far as communicating with the community regarding the pandemic, this town of Branford was probably one of the first towns in the state that, right here in this room, we had the health director present in a meeting. We were probably the first town to begin speaking of the pandemic before it hit in March of 2020. I'll get into more of that later.
Mr. Brockett?
Yeah, I would disagree that this administration has been forward with communications. Quite to the contrary, our residents hardly know what's going on. Under my administration, you could rest assured that our communications will be well informed with everything that goes on in town. Thank you.
Mr. Cosgrove?
And let's just, more about the communications. We use the appropriate forms of communications in terms of press releases, email blasts, notifications in the meetings. We've gotten the word out there on a number of issues and use the appropriate form. As far as the example with the notification with road closures, I think actually our police department has done a tremendous job because they're the ones who will know on day to day, because it is changing day to day in terms of traffic patterns, how to inform our residents when they're aware.
Anything more?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Cosgrove next. How can you determine if personnel in our police department are adequately trained to deal with issues such as autism, racism, or mental illness?
Well, the town of Branford is fortunate that we have great leadership within our police department. And they do a tremendous job in terms of making sure our officers receive training. And in the area of crisis management and those types of situations. So they know how to handle those situations. So we are fortunate as the town of Branford, and I give a lot of credit to the leadership in the department, as well as to the rank and file officers, how they conduct themselves. I will just also say, you may be aware that we've also this year, the police department has a crisis management social worker working within the department. It's a civilian. It's not a sworn officer, but that was something that was brought to me by our leadership within the department, the chief and the deputy chief, and something I strongly supported.
Thank you. Mr. Brockett?
Yeah, thank you. I am fully supportive of our first responders. I think they do a fabulous job, and I think they have all the appropriate training they need. They have a good chief. When the chief needs something, he comes to the RTM or to the Board of Selectmen, and if it's training, it most always gets approved. So I actually agree with the first selectman on our first responders.
Anything further?
No, I think that's
okay. Mr. Brockett next. Do you think the town government is well prepared for facing the 5G technology and to prevent cyber attacks?
I'm going to defer to the first selectman on this because cyber attacks, cybersecurity, and 5G has never been addressed to the RTM, and I have not heard of it at any meeting. So I will defer this to the first selectman. I would hope that we would be.
Yeah, I mean, regards to cyber attack, regardless of 5G or whatever form we're using, the town of Branford, we are fortunate that we have a highly qualified IT department. We actually do quite a bit of safety measures and testing. And I will say our COG, our Council of Governments, which consists of 14 area towns in the greater New Haven area, have recently, we do a lot of shared services meetings, discussions. One of them was on IT. One of the things that they were looking at is to ensure that municipalities were taking proper procedures to protect themselves. That is through various means that they can test that to see if you are. And actually what was doing, Branford had already been doing that type of work prior to where many municipalities in the area were not. So I give credit to our IT staff.
Okay. Anything further?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I would, as first selectman, I would follow up with the IT department to make sure that we do have the appropriate cybersecurity, and if not, I would implement that to protect our systems.
All right. Anything else?
you know, it is a changing industry, but we still stay on top of it. We invest the best of it. So I can sit here confidently and tell you that we take it seriously. We know the risks, and we continue to work to address the risks.
All right. Mr. Cosgrove, the next. Is there any other issue that we have not addressed this evening yet that you would like to include for discussion?
Yeah, I would like to just probably touch upon a few things. There's a lot there in terms of you're only given those few seconds. So
Now, we'll give you 2 minutes if you'd like.
Are these closing remarks, or we just
No,
want to do?
these are not closing, not yet.
Okay, well, I listen, I think the town of Branford, as I said, going back to our accomplishments and what we've done, I think, you know, and it seems like there's a campaign my opponent is taking on in terms of lack of economic development, lack of communication. And I just want to say, I think certainly there's communication. You know, as far as Mr. Brockett and Selectman Dunbar putting out a letter to voters saying that, you know, the event that took place on Main Street, I think is shameful. I think the fact that a campaign would kind of stoop to that level is shameful. I just want to clear the record. The town of Branford, our public safety personnel, emergency responders, town staff followed the emergency protocols to a T. And it is through those efforts of many that didn't become a worse tragedy than it could have. So to say and criticize where, you know, the first selectman did nothing, the first selectman didn't get out there and send a text message to everybody. Listen, you know what? In those types of situations, a leader does the protocols that are, everybody is aware of the team. A politician seeks the camera. A politician seeks to have a quote in print, not a leader. So I'm happy and proud of the way this town responded in a crisis situation.
Okay. Mr. Brockett, do you
Yeah.
have any other new issue?
Well, can I respond to that issue first?
All right.
Yes, thank you. This was the active shooter situation in April. The correspondence that we put out in our campaign said the following. Most residents were kept in the dark with respect to the active shooter. That is absolutely a factual and true statement. The first selectman did not inform any resident in this town that there was an active shooter. Had he informed them, everybody would have been stayed away and the police would have been able to do their job. Our first responders acted admirably and did a terrific job, and they were acknowledged by Ray and I in an editorial in the Sound immediately following the incident. The first selectman was on vacation, and I don't deny anybody the right to a vacation. However, if you're going to go on vacation, somebody should be left in charge. In my view, every resident in this town should have been informed immediately so they would have stayed away from the area. This has nothing to do with what our first responders did. They did a phenomenal job, and Ray and I credited them for that job. Thank you.
I'm just going to have to respond to that.
Yes.
Because I was in contact within minutes of our emergency personnel that day, okay? Within minutes. As far as your criticism of and how you would have communicated, well, that communication, Mr. Brockett, is in contrast to our emergency protocols. So the fact, you know what, you're not in that position, you didn't know, but your running mate, Ray Dunbar, had that role of emergency management director. And for him to sign on to that letter I think, brings a lot of things into question, because as I said, working with our emergency personnel, we followed our emergency protocols to a T.
Anything more?
No.
Okay. Let's move on to your closing statements. You each.
Excuse me, you asked me if there were any other issues. I responded to that.
Yes,
Did I get
are you
that
ready?
same question?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. There is another issue that I would like to talk about very briefly. That's open space. This is another area that has been completely overlooked by the current administration. Brantford is incredibly fortunate to have nearly 1,700 acres of open space. The Supply Pond, Pisgah Brook Preserves, the Quarry, and Beacon Hills to the Farm River. We also have 77 acres of property in and around Tabor Drive. What a treasure this space is. Under Tom and Ray's plan, not only we will protect all open spaces, it plays an important role in preserving our environment. These open spaces also have the potential to be so valuable to our residents. We can improve our trail system work hand in hand with the land trust and environmental groups for the right approach. With a small investment, we can make this part of our economic development plan to attract businesses and young families to Brantford. Quality of life issues are key consideration, especially those with a younger workforce. This has been a wasted opportunity, and Tom and Ray will fix this problem. Thank you.
Your response?
Just yet. I mean, open space overlooked. I don't know. I've actually acquired open space under this administration. We improved the trail system under this administration. We also work to improve our existing open space by being good stewards of the property that we own. So we've established pollinators. We've understand and educate and advocate for the elimination of invasive species that can overtake an area. So to say we overlooked open space, I think isn't supported by my record.
I would disagree. This administration opened Ecology Park in 2014, and it's been closed for the last year. We had a small tornado in town about a year ago, August. The Supply Pond is littered with trees, and none of them have been picked up. We can do a much better job. Thank you.
Again, the facts don't support Mr. Brockett's claims as far as Supply Pond. As you said, we have over 1,000 acres. You think it's feasible to go in and pick up every downed tree within 1,000 acres of open space? No, we opened up our trail system. We cut it back through the help of many volunteers and commissions, as well as opened up the areas that were vulnerable, such as the dam area. So again, his statements don't reflect reality.
I would disagree.
Are you ready with your closing statement now, Mr. Brockett?
I am.
We'll give you 2 minutes for that.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Shore League of Women Voters for putting on this debate and giving us the opportunity to share Tom and Ray's views and vision on how Brantford should be run. Rather than summarize the issues we discussed, I think it's important for our voters to learn a little about who Tom is. I was born and raised in Brantford, and one of 6 boys. My dad was a dairy manager at First National Stores for nearly 50 years, and Mom stayed home. From the first day my older brother went to kindergarten until the last day my younger brother graduated from high school, our mom was Miss PTA. Her license plate even said PTA. When my younger brother graduated from high school, Mom became an active member of the state PTA. Our parents instilled education, hard work, and kindness as important qualities to bring forward. Upon graduating from high school, I enlisted in the United States Air Force, where I served 4 years, one of which was in Vietnam. Following my service to my country, I took a job with the federal government as an air traffic control specialist. I started at Albany, New York, and later transferred to Chicago O'Hare, where I worked as a journeyman air traffic controller for many years. I was a strong supporter, advocate, and early member of the Air Traffic Controllers Union, PATCO, so that we could obtain better working conditions and better lives for our families. I held several leadership and executive positions with the union. In August of 1981, there was a strike and President Reagan fired us. My wife and I sold our home, moved back to Brantford with our 2 children, and began working. I joined my brother, who had a small professional racing bicycle shop that operated out of Mom and Dad's basement. Within a few years, we expanded the business to create a much larger retail trade and mail order. A short time later, we rented a retail store in the center of Brantford, which is now Possessions, where we operated the business. During this same time, I enrolled at South Central Community College, became class president, and graduated in 2 years with an associate's degree. I received a scholarship to Wesleyan University, where I attained my bachelor's degree. Following Wesleyan, I attended UConn Law School for 3.5 years and received my law degree.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid you've reached the 2-minute limit. Mr. Cosgrove.
I'd like to again thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to be here tonight. 8 years ago, I was honored to have the support of Branford voters to change Branford for the better. I have worked every day across party lines to do some good for a town where I live and work and raise my family. Lots of people like to talk about communication. You know, there are 2 ways to communicate. There's talk and there's action. If you want a first selectman who talks a lot, who gives speeches and makes promises, I'm not your guy. But if you want action, results that make our town a great place to be, then the choice this year is clear. Let's look at what we did together over the last 8 years. You told us you wanted a better Walsh School. We built it. You told us you wanted a new home for our seniors and an upgraded facility at the community house. We built that too. And when the need to address a deteriorating animal shelter arose, we pulled together the community and got to work. And we did all that while maintaining a AAA bond rating from Standard & Poor's and keeping debt service to 8 cents on every dollar. For a decade, politicians gave speeches about sustainability. We built a solar farm and established a coastal resiliency fund and implemented an energy efficiency program at all town buildings and school buildings as well. For a decade prior to me taking office, we listened to politicians talk about economic development. We have approved projects underway all over town that will grow the commercial grand list. A new Amazon development at 53, and we continue to have talks with developers to bring Costco back to exit 56. For a decade, prior to me taking office, we listened to politicians talk about taxes. We cut the average growth in spending and grew the grand list by $27 million and brought in over $45 million in grants to avoid new taxes. And we have the lowest mill rate and more services than most every other town. But I need to ask one thing, for you to support the Cosgrove for Branford team so we can continue to make Branford a better town for all of us. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the candidates for participating in this lively debate. This is now October 11th, and this debate will be shown repeatedly over television and online outlets. I'd like to thank the BCTV crew for helping us produce this event. And I'd also like to inform viewers that the State League of Women Voters is hosting a voter's guide online at vote411.org, vote411.org, to help residents find more information about all of the towns in Connecticut's local candidates who are running for election this November. We urge you to be an informed voter before you show up, either in person or fill out your absentee ballot for the November 2nd election. And thank you for watching this debate.